Hey BookTube, how's it going? Long time no see. I just thought of changing scenery for a minute to do a final video at my current house. It's also not inside because inside is full of boxes and there's no nice book backdrops, but I just know I haven't checked in with you guys in a while. Also, I do, obviously, as I'm outside, apologize for ambient noise. But as I haven't checked in with you guys in a while, then this is kind of going to be my march through May wrap up because I haven't done one since then, and I've read quite a few books that will be. I'll put the books on the screen with the little screenshots from my Goodreads, but I honestly don't remember all of these books, so bear with me, but we're gonna do our best to go on this journey. So without further ado, I lost my mouse. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first book I read in March was To a God Unknown by John Steinbeck. It is what is often compared to his precursor to writing East of Eden. Interesting book. I did actually enjoy it a lot more than I was expecting to, but and it was a really short, easy, kind of just fun read to dip my toes back into Steinbeck because this was right before I started doing the buddy reading multiple big Steinbeck books with Kat, which I'll get to in a little bit later on in this video. But so it was a good book. I don't really remember my rating at this point. It's on my Goodreads. I'll have my Goodreads linked down below. What's next? Next, I read the Lost Adventures from Avatar: The Last Airbender graphic novels. Yeah, it was a bunch. Basically, that one is the stories of missing time of activities, and some time has passed within the TV shows. The lost stories kind of fill in some of those gaps, which I thought was super fun. The next book I read was with Kat, the John Steinbeck Tales, The Acts of King Arthur and His Other Noble Knights, or something like that. Our whole discussion on that has already been posted, and that will be linked down below. Maybe I'll actually use the card thing, but go check that out if you want to hear what I thought. But basically, I consider it more of a translation than a retelling by John Steinbeck about the mythology of the Knights of King Arthur. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Words are hard. The next book I read was Someone to Watch Over Me by Judith Mcnaught, which is, I think she writes she's an older author, she's more my mom's time, but it's a thriller novel, and it was absolutely fantastic. I do remember that I gave this book 5 stars. The twist was insane, but basically you're following this Broadway actress in New York, and I think it's set in the late 90s, and it was absolutely so fun, and it was written super well, and I loved it. The next thing I read was a collection of short stories by Oscar Wilde, and it's titled The Canterville Ghost and Other Short Stories, or Other Stories. I loved it a lot. I read Picture of Dorian Gray earlier this year, and I just had never actually read anything from him before. It missed me in school, but so I just wanted to kind of dip my toes into a little bit more of his work, and absolutely loved it. And then I read Circe by Madeline Miller, and that was also a fantastic book. 5 out of 5 stars for sure, no questions asked. I didn't have a lot of information on what to expect going into the book, but I really did love it, and you're basically getting an expansion on the character Circe, which you meet in a little bit when you read the Odyssey. She's the witch who is trapped on the island, and she tries to convince Odysseus to stay with her before he ends up going back to his wife and son eventually. But it is such a beautiful book, written so well, and I cried. I just do generally love mythology, but I would say that Madeline Miller is very accessible writing, so if you're not familiar with the stories, you can definitely still give this book a try. And then I believe I listened to it translated, and I say translated because it's translated from Middle English to Present English, which was super helpful, but I listened to a translation of the entire Canterbury Tales. Those stories are insane. They are super fun. A few of them are a little bit too weird for me, but honestly, it's a great time, and if you do, I'll try and remember to put in the description box down below who translated it, because if you're wanting to read these stories but old/Middle English is a lot for you, then I super recommend this translation. The next book I read was Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park, and I've read most of Michael Crichton's books, and I love them. They're fantastic, very scientific or technology-based thrillers. Jurassic Park was no exception. I didn't read it for so long because I had seen the movie, but I waited long enough that I basically did not remember anything from the movie because I saw it as a child. So, loved it. I think I ultimately gave it 4 out of 5 stars just because I was annoyed by one of the children characters, which is why they aged up the girl in the movie, I think. But yeah, it was a really fantastic book. I just was annoyed by her. Although I can't say why, because I too would also scream a lot if I was being chased by dinosaurs. So, moving on, I read The Cherry Orchard, which is a play by Anton Chekhov. Been wanting to expand my Russian literature repertoire, and it was a book I got from my grandmother's. It was bound like a book, but obviously it was a play. I really enjoyed it. It was the good old Russian aristocracy debate, and this one had like a cherry orchard. Like, this family was going into poverty, so they had to sell their cherry orchard, and that's honestly about all I remember. It was fun. Don't really have a rating on that one. I don't think it was super short. Also read the Penguin Black Spine Classic edition of the Epic of Gilgamesh. I've been kind of wanting to read more ancient literature, so I started with this, and it was a good time. I assume it's translated, but that was also one of the original oratory stories, so maybe that was just like the last way they told it, oratively. I don't know. Words are hard. And then I read the first, second, and third of the Rift Avatar: The Last Airbender graphic novel books. Super fun. Actually had a great time with those. I love Avatar, and though that one is the third trio of books set after the TV show, because it's The Search, The Promise, The Rift, so I did those. Had a great time. Loved them. No complaints. I did read after that the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. I liked it. It was a little hard for me, and it kind of wasn't as captivating as I was wanting it to be around when I read it. I do intend to continue with the series. It's just not super high on my bucket list at the moment, or on my to-do list, I should say, because I've been in a reading slump, and reading this book at that point probably didn't help, but I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It's different, and I think it's very interesting, and the world is very cool, but it was kind of very hard for me to track and follow. And then the way some of the lines or the storylines blurred at the end, I wasn't like a humongous fan of, and it was just like, it felt for me anticlimactic. I do want to continue with the series. It just wasn't what I was, probably my best idea at the time I read it. The next book I read was the first Smoke and Mirrors Avatar graphic novel, because that was the only one they had in the store, and that was next. It was also good. I don't remember specifically what it was about. The next book I read was Black Souls. It's the second book in a YA historical fantasy series based off of the pirate Blackbeard. No, I didn't read the first one, and no, I didn't read the third one, but it was just, honestly such a fun story. I was raised on the stories of pirates, and I loved reading this. It was, I think, really well done, and the story was fun. There was a little love interest, and then we obviously got all of the pirate shenanigans, but it's, before Blackbeard is a full-fledged pirate, so it's, his origin story. Definitely recommend the series. I don't read a lot of middle grade or YA these days, and I did enjoy it. So you'll see a little X on the House of Leaves box. I marked it as red in Goodreads just because I was annoyed that it was still there. I do intend to finish it, but again, it just wasn't working with my reading slump, and I have it was on my Goodreads for forever. So I did enjoy what I enjoy what I had read so far, so I am excited to continue. I reread after that the Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. I still love Ayn Rand's books, and I don't love them necessarily, again, because I agree with her with her and what the messages of the book, but I think they're really good books to make you think, and I love her writing style. And yeah, so in the Fountainhead, we are following an architect, and I believe it's like post the Depression, but early 1900s architecture named Howard Rourke, and it's kind of his journey in with his individualism and his aggressiveness and refusal to sacrifice any amount of his morals or his desires for like the common man. So obviously it's like a anti-socialism book, but honestly sometimes Ayn Rand's books are so anti-socialist it turns out they actually make you believe in socialism. I'm kind of in the middle of that spectrum. I read it to kind of I obviously have read it before, but it's really good. There is a multiple, I think, there's more than one like content warning trigger on this book for violence against women, so heads up. And there's a rape scene for sure, but I do think it is a book that people should read in their lives. That and Atlas Shrugged. I still personally like Atlas Shrugged more. My family can go away; they think this one's better, but yeah, it's still a great book, and I did enjoy reading it. I did the audio, so I've read it physically and on the audio. Both are enjoyable literature intake methods. I then read the first graphic novel of White Sands, which is, I think, supposed to be in the Cosmere. It's the Brandon Sanderson Sand Magic. It was actually really fun. I had read the portion of it that was in Arcanum Unbounded, and I was like, I want to actually read this. And I kind of told myself, if the book is ever at the bookstore, I'm going to go ahead and pick it up and read it, no matter what. Because their graphic novels are kind of annoyingly expensive, and it bothers me. But it was actually there, so I went ahead and purchased it. So I will continue on. I think there's like 2 or 3 of them whenever I find them in the store. I also, for the Sander fans read-along, reread The Alloy of Law, which is the first book in Mistborn Era 2. Loved it. I love Wax and Wayne. And we kind of are just introduced into this steampunk Wild West setting with these 2 new characters that are not just like allomancers, but there's twinborns that have allomantic metals and ferrochemical magic capabilities. So it's a fantastic time. I will say, if you're going into them expecting Mistborn Era 1, you will be disappointed, but if you're willing and able to kind of just enjoy being back in that universe, I loved it. I liked them more than Mistborn Era 1 for me, personally. Also, I think the women that are in this book, obviously there's not a Vin kind of character here, but Marcy and Steris in this trilogy, even in the first book, are just fabulous, and there's two of them for sure, and there's a few other more women's side characters, so it's a little bit more gender balanced, so to speak. Either way, I love the books. I really enjoyed rereading Alloy of Law. The next book I read, or I completed, was Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. It was very good, very informative, nonfiction. Definitely like a thick textbook kind of thing, but it honestly was very interesting to read, and it was very captivating considering the density of the material. So kind of takes us all the way back from the dawn of man, so from the Neanderthal, and there's another pre-Homo sapien variety of humans, sort of, and then through the Industrial Revolution. And Homo Deus is D-E-U-S is the one that comes after, so it's like from present day today to the future. Also, the time I've been sitting out here, my hair is becoming straightened. It's very hot and humid here in the place I live. And then I reread Daughter, Fortune by Isabella Yande, but I read it in English this time because if you remember, I read Hija de la Fortuna, which I think... So I got a lot more out of the book in English, obviously, because that is my native language, but there was also some things that disturbed me more about the book because I read it in English. Like, there's this whole, like, tangent that I definitely read and kind of hard translated in my brain from Spanish, but, like, it was a lot creepier in English because I was, like, yucky about it. Like, there was this one Chinese character who, like, was obsessed with finding a wife with like the small feet, and it was a lot about like there was like way too many pages about that, which I definitely didn't read as in depth in the Spanish read. So the book was still good. I still liked the story. There was just a few things, and I definitely got more of the magical realism. I just didn't like a few of the overly descriptive scenes that were easier for me to read. The next book I read was Hood Feminism by Kendall. That is also a nonfiction book, and I think it is a very important book for people to read if they consider themselves feminists, especially if they're not people of color, because it kind of it very clearly describes and like explains the effects that the feminism movement has had on like not addressing some basic issues or not addressing issues equivocally across the board. And if you are a feminist, you believe in like equality between men and women, and it should be all men and all women in this picture, not just white women or the majority race of women in the country that it's affecting. So I think it's an important read. It is America-centric focused, but I think it would apply if you lived elsewhere in the world. The next book I read was Panchinko by Minjin Lee for the Asian Readathon. I intended to read more books for Asian Readathon, but the reading slump is not treating me nicely. But Panchinko was a beautiful, beautiful book. It made me cry. And it's the first audiobook that's truly actually made me cry. So that is very impressive. But it basically is a multi-generational tale of a South Korean woman and her family around her as South Korea is taken over by China and Japan during like the Manchurian Revolution or War, I'm sorry, and then they end up having to move to Japan, and like it goes into like the racial imbalance between and discrimination from Japanese to the South Korean people, and it's very expansive. It goes into a whole lot, and we get to see like the main character's mother and her children and her husband, and like it kind of spreads out that way on the family tree. But it is a beautiful, beautiful book, and it is historical fiction, and you basically, I believe, go from the early 1900s through World War II and beyond. So it is a powerful read. I 10 out of 10 recommend it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I don't really think I did that explanation justice, but it was really good, and I think the audiobook was well done. There was a lot of bad reviews on the audiobook. In no way am I South Korean, so I'm not sure if the words were actually pronounced incorrectly, but I did research on the narrator, and she is of the proper nationality descent, so I like the audiobook. On Audible, I wouldn't say that it deserved all the bad reviews for performance, but I then read Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman, which is the story of the sons of the spider god Anansi. I believe it is a god of myth and folklore from the African continent. I'm not very familiar with it more beyond that, but you basically, in the book, Anansi dies, and you follow his son as his son rediscovers like the magic that his father had, and his brother, who was actually like the magically gifted child. And it's a story of family dynamics and kind of refinding the myth and the culture, which I believe Neil Gaiman does well, because that's generally like a theme in a lot of his books. It's about like rediscovering the old and ancient gods and whatnot. So I had a really fun time reading it. I haven't read one of his books in a while, so it was kind of fun to get back into that energy. And then lastly, officially have completed, by the time I'm filming this video, which there is still 4 days left in May, and I'll talk about the books I hope to finish before we end this video. Okay, goodness, this is long. I've done this all in one take. Woohoo! Yay, less editing. The last book I officially finished was Anne of Green Gables, and I listened to the audiobook. I have been wanting to watch the Anne with an E TV show for a while, so I'm like, I need to actually read this book, and I never read it as a child, and I didn't think I was going to like it because I didn't really love Little Women, but it was actually so fun, and I had a great time with the book. And Rachel McAdams as narrator was very fun as well on Audible. So that I think I actually gave it like 4 out of 5 stars. I had no expectations going into the book, and I really enjoyed it. So that is all of the books I've officially read between March 1st and, or I should say completed between March 1st and today, the 26th of May. But I am actively reading East of Eden for Kat and I's reading deals. I think we're going to meet after the first week of June and discuss that, and I've discussed the book. It is one of my favorite books of all time, if not the favorite, and it is my 5th or 6th reread. And I'm actually annotating it this time, so hopefully I don't have to reread it quite as often, because I always want to reference stuff and I can't find it. So hopefully the annotating of the book will be helpful for me on that. Because every time I try to go to like tell someone about it and I can't find a quote I'm looking for, I have to go reread the entire book. And then I am also reading Shadows of Self, the second book in the Mistborn Era 2, also for the Sander Fans read-along, and I will also hopefully finish that in the next week. I am loving reading Expanse, the first Expanse book, which I believe is Leviathan Wakes. That is the series I'm, I guess, getting into now, and I am almost done. And I have been reading this since like February, but I lent my Kindle out to a friend and I didn't get it back. But I am almost done reading the 3rd book in the Lies of Locke Lamora trilogy, which I believe, or the Gentleman's Bastard sequence. It's not the Red Skies one, but my phone is not, my computer's not loading, but I'll put it in the written on the screen. I'm almost done with that book, and I will also hopefully finish, so I hope to finish East of Eden, Shadows of Self, and the 3rd Locke Lamora book before May ends, and then in June I'm going to kind of focus on reading the Expanse books and getting back into the Wheel of Time, and I'm going to participate in Ancients-a-thon, and I will be doing, hopefully after I move and can actually hold up the books, the Ancients Readathon. I want to read 2 ancient Greek literature objects, and then the description for Ancients is before 1700, so I'm also going to try and do Don Quixote, which will be fun. So that is all I have for you, and I hope you enjoy this video of me catching y'all up on where I've been. I will give y'all bookshelf tours of the new place and whatnot, so thanks for watching. Happy, hopefully, almost summer in it time now. Woohoo! Bye, everyone.